leave the meeting. Is that an option?
No, it's not an option.
This one is for my ancestors.
And we're live.
I feel them on my shoulder. This one is for my ancestors. Begging me to drop bombs like boulders. I feel them on my shoulder. As a cultural molder. Begging me to insist that I use my gifts as a lyricist to bear witness to the past, present, and future of African greatness, and always place emphasis on the beauty of blackness. I never digress into the common connotation of my color with slackness. Tell the people the truth, not petty myths like Loch Ness. Direct them to the proof of an African genesis and be a portal through which they can access the inner emperor and the inner empress. Cause it's the duty of every man and every woman to manifest God in flesh. So we honor the body, the Ori and the Ruach Kodesh. We say Hetep Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, Jah bless cause. This poem and all the rest are for the ancestors. We stand upon their shoulders. So rise, you African sons and daughters. Let me bust the steel files and folders. You see the people dying, but you know not what they're dying for. You hear the children crying, but you know not what they're crying for. You tell me that you're trying, but you know not what you're trying for. How can we win the war if you know not what you're fighting for? You want to see more clearly, but your vision don't stretch very far. Get your head out of the clouds so you can see beyond the stars. Embrace Venus and plant your feet on Mars. Your mind should span galaxies, but you keep it locked behind bars. It's time to get grounded in the tradition which our ancestors founded. Every time we left it out, we tend to get pounded by European ideology. We are confounded, but hearken your ear so you can hear when the echo bell has sounded. And have no fear, cause we are always surrounded by the ancestors. They're wrapped around my shoulders. And even when times get bad and cold, them's the times we get bad and bold. The spirit world is accessible, it's permeable and it's porous. The ancestors sit behind the veil patiently waiting for us. They implore us to join them in chorus, to fight against those who would detest and detour us. But some careless Ethiopians think that somehow the plantation owners now adore us. And if we stick our heads in the sands, our enemies will ignore us. But if that's what we think, then we're on the brink of extinction like Tyrannosaurus. No time to blink, time to link with that and those which came before us. Like the Sphinx, which is really Horem, Haket, and Heru, who is higher than Horus. None but ourselves can free our minds, and none but ourselves can ensure that we are victorious. In a world of criminals, the righteous man and woman is notorious. But have no fear, stand firm by your God and also by your glorious ancestors.
Grateful greetings, Hotep, to our brothers and sisters. Welcome to Us Speaks, where we are encouraging our sisters and brothers to embrace the Pan-African legacy, to embrace that which is all encompassing of the African experience, whether it be through culture, healing, arts, technology, spirituality, education, all types of organization, and of course, liberation, unification, social governance, and much, much more. Tonight, we're very honored to have with us the powerful revolutionary African woman, a long-standing, experienced African Pan-African revolutionary organizer within the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, the All-African Women's Revolutionary Union, and as well as moving forward the Revolutionary African Women's Movement globally. The Most Right Honorable, my beloved sister, my beloved elder sister, Nana Yaofibia, Queen Grandmother, Nana Moya Mzuri.
Uhuru, Iswiletu.
You know, it's powerful to have you join us. As the flyer reflects, we're going to have a discourse, just some, positive reflections in recognition of revolutionary African ancestor and Pan-African warrior, Kwame Ture. We picked this particular day because this is the day in which his physical frame made its transition. And around the globe, it is a very significant day because of the work, the organization, the revolutionary fervor, leadership par excellence, and just downright Pan-African warriorship of Brother Kwame Ture. And for those that are tuning in here on YouTube, we really encourage you to let other persons know what's taking place in this discourse, this versation with our beloved sister, Queen Mother, Nana Moya Mzuri. It's so wonderful to be able to have you just give some reflections, because you've been in this organization, the AAPRP. I believe you celebrated 4 decades.
Yeah, 45 years.
There we go, even longer.
October.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's important for persons to be aware of the longevity, the layer of discipline, the linkages that you have been able to establish, not only in the 48 contiguous, but throughout the Americas, throughout, Eurasia, throughout Africa, and the wider global engagement. That's very, very significant, because the layers of Pan-African legacies, the layer of Pan-Africanism as the form, the manner in which we liberate, the way that we unify, and in the context of the AAPRP, the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific social. I mean, we can go into a whole direct piece. I am really grateful that we are able to just see the significance of November 15th in Pan-African history, and just would encourage you to share with us, just some of your memories, some of the positive memories that you have to share with the viewing audience and the listening audience on the life and times of our illustrious ancestor, Kwame Ture.
Ashe. Yeah, well, I'm always, we're family. You're my younger sister. And anytime you call, I try to answer and respond. So, because I know it's important. So I'm always here to do whatever you ask me to do. I've spent the majority of my life getting assignments, so I don't know any other life, right? But to just get an assignment and try to carry it out. So I give, I give thanks that we are still here to honor him. In all honesty, Kwame is quite alive for me. So I honor him. To me, I honor people on the day they're born, on their Earth Day, and I try not to get into memorializing because Kwame lives. For those of us in the AAPRP, those of us who are close to him, Kwame is still alive, and so we look at this day as the day of his physical disappearance. But for us, he is still living. He is still pushing the line. He is still reminding us of the work that needs to be done. And every day that we experience whatever happens in Africa or the diaspora, it is a a constant reminder of the assignments that we were given and the work that we have to do. So for that, I can say, that Kwame, for me, was a living example. And I usually post for his birth and for his physical disappearance, why he is so important. But for me, the greatest importance for me personally, because I have been around so many people and a lot of people of notoriety in the movement, Kwame never retired from the movement. He was in a movement that many people that are famous were in, and a part of a legacy of the 60s that a lot of people were in. And they took what they feel very important jobs. And I don't mean to belittle anyone's choice or direction, but Kwame stayed on the path. He never deterred from the path of liberation, organizing, unity for African people and for indigenous people or just loving people all over the world. He never took a government job. He took the job of being a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, of the party, the party Democratic de Guinea, the PDG. He took his assignments there. He took assignments from the Nation of Islam and Minister Elijah Muhammad, who asked him to continue to build the Black United Front. He took assignments from the Jamahiriya and Muammar Gaddafi to bring the indigenous communities and the African communities together. He took assignments from our founder, President Kwame Nkrumah, as well as our second president, co-president Ahmed Sekou Ture, to continue the work of Pan-Africanism. He took on many assignments, and for that, and he continued to do this work to his last breath. That is the example that constantly burns in my consciousness, and that he was an everyday person. I talked to several people who say, we picked him up from the airport. He wanted something to eat. He'd sleep on a couch. He'd sleep on wherever you provided for him. He was a humble servant of the people. And I don't meet many people like that. With all of his notoriety, as much as he's been broadcast through the news and even vilified, Kwame was a humble organizer. He loved the people. He was, he loved socializing and interacting, whether there were babies in the room or an elder older than him, 80, 90 years old. He was always listening, attentive, engaging with people. And that is the person that I remember. And that's, the person that at least I can say has been an example for me. None of us can be who other people are. We all have our paths, but that example, like my example of my elders in my own family that I look up to, those are examples that guide and direct me.
And that's exactly why the discourse on highlighting some of his, and you've gone through my Q&A, right?
Oh, okay.
Q&A I didn't get to send you. It's fabulous because that's the intention. It's so that persons know that he was a real brother.
Right.
He was a real brother. He was like with the earth, not just down to earth, but with the earth, with the masses of our people, and was able to engage if he needed to do the eloquent speeches and engage and put the petty bourgeois and the bourgeoisie in check. He was able to do that, and a wordsmith par excellence. And if he needed to prepare his delivery for the common brother or sister that may have not read all 19 treatises from any particular historical frame of reference, he was able to do that too. If it meant being with the brothers and sisters in the hood where the real work happens, or whether it was to be in the spaces of select leaders. I was listening to, because this is what tends to pop up on our social media timelines, are all these different quotations, different videos of his very direct approach on how to speak about what he learned from the Honorable President of Ghana and Guinea-Conakry, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, as well as Ahmed Sékou Touré, and what, how that influenced his own pathway, his own engagement, moving the African Revolution forward, and coming out of the Black Power movement, or even, from his early days around the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And that's why it's important. Another reason we're always honored to have eldresses like yourself bring truth to power and bring the context of the greatness, as well as the humility, as well as the fortuitousness, like it was a strength. Not just everybody could get away with being in all those different areas and dimensions and layers of brothers and sisters and the colonizers and the capitalist imperialists that were literally dismantling, imprisoning, torturing, committing forms of terrorism against our people. So I would love for you to just share also, I appreciate that you were guiding us in understanding how he developed his African name, and that's a pretty powerful linkage, because those brothers were the power and the strength inside of, Western Africa for many, many decades. And to just be able to share, what are some other experiences that you have had with him. We know that the work that he brought forward through the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which still exists. And it's important that persons recognize that this is something that wasn't designed to be temporary. It wasn't like a club. It was designed to really follow through with what was brought forth in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare and beyond, through the writings and the ideological principle organizational works and efforts of Kwame Nkrumah and other Pan-Africanists.
Yeah. So, it's so much that I can really focus on, but just one of the real, I think, real critical issues that Kwame pushed inside the party and outside of the party is the role of ideology. And he, again, this is something that those in the movement have been struggling with for years. Marxism, Leninism was sort of the guiding, and Mao Zedong thought were some of the guiding ideologies in the movement in the early, 60s. And the Black Panther Party, and other movements were following the Red Book or following Marxism or Leninism. Whether you go through Central or South America, folks were impacted by those ideologies. And the role of ideology is to guide our thinking and our behavior and our action, to provide clarity and target our vision, realizing that there is some mental, cultural, and psychological, as well as social decolonization that needs to happen to African people, as well as European people, because capitalism and imperialism and colonialism have really come to create the consciousness of patriotism to their way of life, to the development of colonialism, to the development of capitalism, and for us to be in alignment, and what the French and the Portuguese would call, assimilados, that you assimilate into their system. But, folks like Frantz Fanon, talked about decolonization. And in an ideological and political framework, the ideologies of socialism and communism were ideologies that began to break down those elements of the society and systems that have kept our people oppressed, workers all over the world oppressed. But for us as African people, we have a particular need to delve into the subconscious elements that deal with African and even Asian people and indigenous people that are non-European, that come to deal with the inferiority of our culture, the inferiority of our people, because we have been stigmatized as being less intelligent. Even though we can build civilizations, we can build their societies under colonialism and help launch the Industrial Revolution and help launch, the elements of capitalism through our labor, through our inventions, through the various, gifts and skills that we brought with us. We were stigmatized as being less intelligent, having smaller brains, being less sophisticated culturally, etc. So the need for an African ideology was really, really critical. And so taking from the works of Nkrumah and the works of Ahmed Sekou Ture, as well as the works of Cabral and Sobukwe and Fanon and Garvey and all of these ideologues who have together talked about the equality, if not the superiority of the African culture and consciousness, in that we as people have just enough a right to control our destiny as any other person and any other culture has, any other nation has to do that in that same way, but with principles, with guiding revolutionary principles that will develop and enhance the masses of the people, the masses who are the makers of history, not individuals. And so it was this issue of ideology that really was critical, that Kwame continued to press on, even as much as him going to other organizations and us going to other organizations on the African continent and in other communities and saying, declare your ideology. What is your ideology? What ideology do you follow? Does your people, your organization follow? And it was on that we really began to discuss and struggle and talk about humanism, egalitarianism, even the role of humans in the sense that, and we had a great struggle of, are we as human beings a means to an end or an end in itself? In other words, all the work that we do, is it just that we get to socialism or communism, or is it also for our advancement and development and elevation as humanity? And it's both. And through these ideological and political struggles, we are also learning how to decolonize our behavioral learnings from being in slavery and colonialism, so that we treat each other better, that we respect each other with dignity and equality, and that we see each other as capable, no matter what we think our misgivings are, our shortcomings, or in the English language, they call them handicaps. But in actuality, everyone has a potentiality to work and contribute to the society. And it's these ideological principles that really have been a part of the cornerstone. And in addition to that, there is with that one that we have difficulty in our communities, because our greatest two barriers is unity and organization. So another element of that is principled revolutionary unity, principled unity so that other organizations that we work with, other organizations that we engage with, that we must have principled unity with those organizations, because in the end, aren't we going in the same direction? Aren't we going toward the liberation of our people? Aren't we headed towards the unification of our people? Aren't we headed towards really the liberation of all oppressed peoples? And so it's that principled functional unity, that revolutionary unity that guided and directed us, again, taking from the ideological tenets of Nkrumahism, Tureism, and Cabralism, and Sebukweism. It is those critical elements that really allowed us to critique our own priorities, to critique our own vision and direction, and also to look at the eventual outcome, not to see what we're doing as more is important or superior than any other organization, but our ability to be able to say in our campaigns, to say, if we don't have certain things in common, the least we should have is to be able to work on the campaign to smash the FBI and CIA. We can at least come together to do that, at least have a campaign to unify our people under revolutionary principles of respect and dignity, at least be able to mobilize our people against Zionism and imperialism, to be able to build a unified front for that, to build a unified front to build socialism. So there are so many elements of those things that would allow us to drop the barriers, the walls that sometimes egotistically we believe that your direction or your objective or your vision is greater than someone else's. It's that principled revolutionary unity that also was a very important organizational principle that Kwame pushed. And I remember so many times, it wasn't a lot, but there were a few pivotal times that, in different communities, Kwame would say, hey, come take me. People would not want to go or have anything to do with one organization. He would say, when I come to town, I want to meet with that organization, take me to that organization. And so sure enough, we would make arrangements and I would take him to that organization. People who hadn't dealt with certain individuals, he said, I want to meet with that individual, take me to that individual. And he would. There was no organization or individual and in our community that he could not find some principled element to work with. Because if we're all fighting the evils of the system, if we're all fighting to destroy those elements within capitalism and imperialism that are oppressing our people, there is something we can do to work together. And Kwame was a revolutionary example, and this is without fanfare, without a lot of people knowing. He believed in principled revolutionary unity and functional unity so that we can work together. We'll have elements to work together. And that, to me, was two of the most critical elements to me as an organizer that I have learned from Kwame, even when other folks disagreed with what I was doing. I remember Kwame did it, and so I did it, and I have been able to develop relationships with a lot of people because there's something we can work together on.
And I can bear witness that I've seen that in a variety of different circles and, across the board, whether it's working with our comrades in struggle that are, from the Native Amerindian spaces, indigenous spaces throughout the Americas, Eurasians that are revolutionary in dismantling capitalist, imperialist structures and infrastructure in their respective areas, reaching out to sister and brethren all through the Americas, from the North Pole to the South Pole, Canada, 48 contiguous states, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and all of the different colonial frameworks that are inside, and really speaking with action deliverables connected to that, linked to that. So for that, we're very grateful. I've desired for us to take a very quick moment and just, view a particular excerpt as we were speaking about Kwame in general. I felt it would be appropriate to really, hear and share from his own words so that we can really get that whole idea together. Let's see, what did I redo? There we go.
With our struggle since the 60s, you will see nothing but betrayals by the petty bourgeois elements in our society. The African bourgeoisie is the most corrupt bourgeoisie in the world. In Africa, they seek luxury in the midst of mass suffering. There are more Mercedes in Africa than in any other continent in the world. In America, as soon as they arrive at a position based on this blood of the people, they snatch that position and run away from the people. But you must not think that they represent the people. They only represent their opportunistic self, using the people every step of the way. So you must not be confused. It must be clear then, for the 60s, the class struggle in the African Revolution must be more ruthless and uncompromising than in any other revolution. Here then the masses must come without pity and without mercy to trample upon these reactionary pigs who, after the people have gained struggle through their blood, come to hand back the gains on a silver platter to the very enemy the people fought. This will come as a natural consequence. The people themselves are everywhere screaming that it's time for them to deal with these reactionary pigs. Even in America, they say, our leaders must be held accountable. They're only saying here that these people must be accountable to those who made it possible for them to get there. Thus, not only is the revolution inevitable, but it is clarifying itself and it is qualifying itself. For the African masses everywhere, the clairpoised position now for class struggle has become inevitable and irreversible. The petty bourgeoisie everywhere will be running for cover, but the masses will spare them not. Consequently, we who have dedicated our lives to the people's struggle, we who, knowing that the people will always be free, we, understanding that we must make a contribution to qualify our struggle since the 60s, have been dedicating all our energies to only one task: the organization of the masses of our people. The organization of the masses of our people. We are not running for mayor, we're not running for president. No changes can come from the top down. We're not stupid. Changes can only come from the bottom up. The masses and the masses alone can make them. If you want to learn something from the 60s, the lesson is simple: organize the masses of the people. Thank you.
I felt that just offered us an opportunity to just look at this entire piece directly, just from his own words, right?
Right.
Because it's very interesting that a lot of the films, a lot of the media pieces that are coming out honoring, celebrating, acknowledging, his birth, his life, his transition, tend to hold him only like around SNCC and maybe up to the Black Power space. And then it's kind of like they just go into like a forced silence or some type of amnesia in regards to how he grew, how he progressed, and how he was unapologetic in that progression, coming into the formulating the All African People's Revolutionary Party and coming through that and pushing that whole, the masses are the basis of everything. That to me was really critical. I know some persons, of course, had their feelings a little damaged because of how clear, crystal clear, that he was able to articulate what was the reality in the continent, what many of these elected, selected, appointed African leaders were prioritizing. And we can still see, he was saying these things, up until 98, and we can still see the remnants of that disregard for the masses of African people and just the masses in humanity, right? And of course, there are exceptions. We had some wonderful little breakthrough, clear through spaces, when persons reflect on persons like Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, there were exceptions. When people reflect on the work of, the honorable, my heart always goes on Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, there's a lot, and there's other examples. I mean, persons are attempting to move in that direction. Usually when they speak out too far, they get executed. When they do put the masses of African people forward, they no longer exist. And it was powerful to know and to see and to witness and to experience and to be in an organization and to continue to stay within an organization that Kwame Ture kept putting that line, that ideological framing, that reminder of, organize, organize, organize. So people it's really important that when persons are telling his legacy, any part of his story, don't just stop when he was in the marches, for civil disobedience. Don't just stop when he was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee or or engaged in the Black Panther Party or around the Black Power movement. And don't focus on any of the divisiveness that people like to highlight. It was like this camp and that camp, because you just said it. You just said it, Nana. You just said it. He could go anywhere. He talked to both sides as, again, the core. We can have the discourse. We can do the work and organize together if you are about smashing these capitalist, imperialist, apartheid, Zionist structures and about the masses of the people and the rising of that type of power, right? He was saying those things for decades, and
Yes.
it's now coming into fruition. So I'm really grateful that you gave us the context of understanding that principled unity and that principled unity in organizing so that brothers and sisters that are in respective organizations now can see that and learn from that and not get caught up in, oh, well, he was from Trinidad and he came to America and he did this with SNCC and he was really powerful in Black Power movement. And then it's kind of like people just go into quietude. And I've noticed that, in many of the films, when people speak of revolutionaries in the Americas, they tend to just only look at one thread. It's kind of like looking at W.E. Du Bois and stopping after he wrote The Soul of Black Folks. So you really don't know W.B. Du Bois if you just stop there, because that was just the first third of his 90+ year life. And in the case of Kwame, even in his youthfulness and his transition into the ancestral realms, he did so much that it's important that we speak of him in that holistic frame and don't get limited in only the one segment that persons permit or consider allowable for discussion and engagement. You've said that a number of powerful ways, so I'm very grateful. And that takes me to, see, because you've covered like my other 4 questions. So
let me just throw in a couple of points that you made. One, the focus, I think there's been a weakness in the line because Kwame spoke about we're not running for mayor, we're not running for president, but there were a lot of so-called conscious people that were supporting Obama. There has been a real weakening of the line in our movement because we have become assimilated, the assimilados, because the antithesis of these heroes and heroines that have been out there, because many of them are gone, a lot of people have softened their line. They went to the inauguration. I mean, I was shocked to see the number of people, and we would be out on the campuses and explaining to folks what's going on. But because outside of Africa, there have been, no leaders, so-called leaders that look like us. There was this need to identify. And again, Frantz Fanon tells us about wearing that mask, that even though you wear that mask, it does not make you better or worse. If you don't follow these principles, if you're not following the line, fighting against evil, corruption, etc., then you are just as bad. But there's been a weakening of the line in terms of that. Many folks that believe they're conscious have been pushing for electoral politics, have been veering away. In fact, it has been a deliberate objective of capitalism and imperialism to smash revolutionary parties and push, even in Africa, the election of individuals versus revolutionary parties. Many of these parties that existed during independence, the ones that were truly progressive, they've been trying to destroy them. And in some cases, they have destroyed them, if not, bought off those parties and those leadership, and some of them changed in their form and in their objective. So there has been a weakening of that line. But then there's also a deliberate attempt to call Kwame Stokely Carmichael, to deny calling him Kwame Ture, to deny the connection. It is deliberate to focus on the Black Panther Party and SNCC and not talk about the majority of his work in Africa. Why? Because you do not want Pan-Africanism to be on the lips of the next generation, on the thoughts and lips of the next generation. You want to deliberately separate us, to create those boundaries, because creating, from the Berlin Conference on, creating those borders and those boundaries has been most successful for colonialism, capitalism, and imperialism. So these are deliberate acts. They're not just accidental or people just not wanting to do it. It is a deliberate campaign. It is a part of the construct of, the ideological and political capitalist and imperialist strategy to keep our people divided.
And that's why I'm going to share some of your quotes. Kwame fought for African liberation and hated neocolonialism and pushed for the class struggle to topple our African bourgeoisie. We must unapologetically destroy the class who feeds from our misery. Remembering Kwame Ture, the African revolution must be more ruthless against neocolonialists in our class struggle than ever before. These bourgeois politicians use the people's victories and then exploit the people for their own benefit. And that's coming from our brother, ancestor Kwame Ture. You went as far, and I'm going to keep pulling on you, Nana. Kwame Ture lives. Africa is primary and will be free and united. The bourgeoisie and its media has tried to keep Kwame Ture in America and even deny him his name. But like Muhammad Ali, we know the political line of our enemies, and they too will lose. More Africans are moving home to Africa and naming their children African names, and will build the army of African unity and liberation. Like Kwame, our people love Africa and continue to build Pan-Africanism despite those who hate us but love to exploit us. I think it's important that persons know that, like, again, if you are tuned in, listening, hearing within any kind of visual shot, past tense, look for Nana Moya Mzuri. It's MoyaMzuri on Facebook. And just look at the messages. She doesn't do it all the time, but when she does, it's like a plethora of information and historiography. And we know that she has a publication forthcoming. More on that on the next episode. And I think it's really critical that we look at some of the other pieces. I have one more that I'd like to share before we get ready to close. Kwame Ture was given the assignment to build the African United Front and work closely with the Nation of Islam to build this front. Our unity is not based upon perfect organizations or perfect nations, because there is no perfection. It is based upon common objectives of unity and liberation of African people, no matter where we live, and the primacy of Africa. If we continue to build in these objectives, we must continue to build principled unity, as our liberation depends on it. And again, these are sharings from the reflections, the thoughts, the ideas, the revolutionary African consciousness of our illustrious I can't call you guest because you're my elder sister. So I just got to clean that up. You know, our illustrious, honorable Nana, Moya, and Mzuri-November. I think it's important that persons recognize what is being shared here, because these are the types of treasures, the types of gems, so that when we speak of our revolutionary heroes and sheroes, ancestral ones, as well as those that are amongst the living warriors that are still amongst us, we have to use truth to power. We do not have to spend a whole lot of time apologizing. Well, yes, he was Mr. Carmichael, but he did change his name. But you all remember, no, we need to, if he made the ideological decision to change his name, we need to honor that. And that he embraced not just one significant African revolutionary leader's name, but a second powerful one. And if you're not sure who they are, please, what is the term? Google. There you go. And for me, I'm going to suggest Google Scholar. Don't just Google and find just stuff that you cannot vet and find some valid, foundations and groundations to what you're sharing and learning. But, also look inside of Google Scholar. You'll be surprised because you'll have things that are cited. And if all else seems like it's too complex, Moya and Mzuri and social media. Nana, she brings it. I thought, that's why, some of the videos that you had shared there, we were able to pull those and share this evening. We're really excited, again, the fact that you always remind us of the fact that Kwame was, I love how you said it, is more than an organizer. He was a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party who studied relentlessly to know our history, philosophy, and our revolutionary ideology. Kwame organized wherever he went, always carrying books wherever he traveled, and never stopped reading and organizing, even in his last days. Kwame said the greatest weakness of our people is organization, and it remains our greatest weakness. Kwame said to abandon organization is to abandon the people. He remains our greatest example. So join an organization working towards the unity and liberation of our people. What is it? Ready for the revolution?
Ready for the revolution.
Always.
One last thing.
Please.
One last thing. A lot of people may not know, but there's a lot of negative, this movement has been Me Tooing it and, talking about gender, liberation and women's liberation. And first, let me state that there is no perfection on this plane. Maybe in heaven, wherever that is, or, in Shangri-La, wherever that be, whatever planet that be on. But on this planet, we only know of perfection. And even then in nature, there are elements of imperfection, but nature struggles to perfect itself unabated as long as it's given an opportunity. So if we're looking at criticizing Cuba or China or Venezuela or Zimbabwe or wherever it be, understanding that if the people aren't perfect, those struggles aren't going to be perfect. But as long as they are struggling to perfect and organize and to contribute to the people, then they are doing the good work, right? So when we talk about gender, one thing I have to say is that when the AAPRP, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, was coming into formation, many of us were wondering why. And Kwame was one of the most avid supporters of the founding of the AAPRP. And he said, if you leave it to us, we benefit from your oppression. So why would we fight for your liberation? Because it is our liberation. And so he said, men benefit by exploiting women, no matter where you go, no matter what organization. But if you are fighting to support the AWRU, empower women, tell women to organize themselves and lead this party and lead these movements, then you are doing benefit to not only, and you're doing a great you're making a great contribution to humanity as well as to the women and the men, because both will benefit and grow from each other. But it is this struggle that really showed who Kwame Ture was, because Kwame was excited about the AWRU coming into fruition. Other parties have women's wings. The party did not have a women's wing until 1980. And he continued to struggle for the women's wing to be built, because even we can come and bring him to test and bring any other brother in the movement to test, standing on our ancestors' shoulders for our liberation, for our role, our rightful role in the struggle, front, line, and center. And so it is that kind of person, that kind of revolutionary, in the midst of whatever contradictions they have, for them to fight against those contradictions to help support the liberation and the advancement of those people, because that helps temper them, that helps develop them, that helps develop the movement. And so it's for that reason that Kwame really set the example. And it's very few that I know who have gone so far as to say, yes, we support the liberation of women. Even so, to the point, it's like, what can we do? How can we help? You know, how can we support? It is very rare that you have that kind of individual, and that needs to be said. People talk about, oh, he abused women in the 60s and SNCC, and he did this and did that. Show me one brother who hasn't taken advantage of a sister, and they not alive no more. You know, the ones living are, you know, for the most part, some, if not the majority, are colonized, are taught, are educated to exploit women, to exploit each other. That's what we're taught. That's how we're educated. That's how we're acculturated. And so for us to break free, we have to have that ideological and political decolonization, that mental and cultural decolonization. And through those struggles, we hope to come on the other side, where not only are we as women standing up and fighting for liberation, but we are also supporting and being supported by our brothers to do the same, to support us, to help find a place for us if we not making our own place, where we should be making our own spaces, finding our own places and fighting for our place in the movement, in leadership. As my hashtag, women must lead, African women must lead. Women are over 50% of the continent population. Worldwide, at least 50 to 51%, 52% of the population throughout the African continent. We should be leaders. And Kwame supported that. He advocated that. He helped the formulation of the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. And when they called for him to speak at the Million Man March, we said, we need to have a sister. That was our principal position, is that where a brother speaks, we want a sister to speak. Absolutely. And he made sure that Bowina was on the stage. And then we continue to have those struggles, but never did Kwame deny making sure sisters played a role in every program. I mean, having sisters go to Azania, South Africa, and begin organizing there, encouraging sisters to go to Guinea, to go to Ghana, to organize. Kwame was committed to the revolution, the whole revolution, the role of women and men in the role they play. And that needs to be remembered. That's a revolutionary example, and it's very rare that you see that example. The humility, the support, the love, the sisterhood, the brotherhood is real, but you very rarely see it. But Kwame exhibited that.
And for that, we're grateful. this has been, like I said, this could easily be part of a 12-month series on the work that's been established through the legacy of Kwame Ture. We're very grateful that you were able to share just a snippet of your own experiences. And, you know, all I would probably add would be that that was how, as Cadre, we were assigned to go to Burkina Faso and work under the administration of Thomas Sankara in between 84 and 86. And we're 1984 and 1986. And brothers and sisters that came into the organization, that was your assignment. Yes, you did work study and you read from a book list, but then it was always connected to particular deliverables and action. And then it was to get you into the community with the masses in the places where you resided or studied, but also to go overseas and to really put your hands in the dirt, literally, whether it was with agriculture. I learned a lot about plumbing and electrical. I learned just things that I would not have experienced had I not had the opportunity to really learn from powerful ancestors like Kwame Ture, you know, Moya Sawa, you know, many others, and to still be able to organize and learn from eldresses like yourself. Nana Moya and Mzuri-November. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that you were able to share with us this evening. Any closing reflection as we get ready to move forward? Because you said, I know you've given a lot, and I know we could do this again. We're going to do it again in another night.
Yes. Yeah. My only thing, and I think I posted today, is if we really love and admire Kwame, we need to follow his example.
Oh, there we go. It's with that being said, I'm very grateful. We're going to come out this way that we pretty much so started. We're going to use a little bit of sound. You know, we're going to use our beloved sister New Legacy from her rebirth of the new life, because we free.
Ashe, Asante Sana, Nkosi, Sajinalo, Adupwe.
All of that. Do I want
all of that? Thank you, sister.
Give thanks.
Well, I'm under no obligation. We free.